It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
All the agendas, all the objectives, all the increasingly dangerous technologies of total control, environmental manipulation, pandemic profiteering, public monitoring, and imminent lockdown will mean absolutely nothing on a dead planet. Do the controllers lie? Obviously. Does that mean we should always take the opposite position on everything they and their matrix media mouthpieces say, including denying that the planet and the climate are broken? That would be folly. Official sources are beginning to admit to what they can no longer hide. If you have the courage to face bad news head on, you're on the right broadcast. The atrocities taking place in our formerly deep blue skies continue unabated. The climate engineers control the spigot, where it will rain, when, how much, and how toxic. From devastating droughts to deadly deluges, they decide. Welcome to Geoengineering. With that in mind, from climate.com, from drought to deluge, why weather extremes are becoming the new normal. End headline. Yes, why? Keep your eyes to the skies and you'll have your answer. Now there is this. Yesterday from CNN, officials report multiple deaths from catastrophic flooding in central Texas. This is in spite of the fact that much of Texas is still under drought designations. For the record, all the way back in the 1960s, the U.S. military was so successful at controlling the flow of precipitation in Vietnam that by the 1970s, the INMOD treaties were passed, international treaties forbidding such operations in wartime settings. Does any country abide by such treaties? Of course not, most especially over their own populations for which the international treaties didn't even apply. Question, how much more advanced are their weather manipulation technologies now? You decide. If you think the money printers that ultimately control the U.S. government and military are here to help you and your posterity, think again. From phys.org, fear, trust, and other human factors are vital, yet overlooked pieces of solar geoengineering research. From the report, human perceptions hold the key to the future of solar geoengineering and other approaches to cool our warming planet. So far, the report states, solar radiation management, development, and deployment remain largely hypothetical. What a blatant, glaring, shocking lie that's so visible in our skies and has been for decades. They continue. Conspiracy theories and misinformation have also contributed to skepticism, reflecting a general wariness toward such initiatives. Stop there. It's not initiatives, it's ongoing catastrophic realities. And what could go wrong with filling our skies with 40 to 60 million tons of toxic nanoparticles, a plethora of toxic nanoparticles year in, year out, manipulating those particles with highly destructive, extremely powerful frequency transmissions? What could possibly go wrong? More total tyranny from the so-called climate science sources continuing to try and marginalize any and all that are not okay with planetary programs of certain omnicide. Welcome to climate engineering, aka weather warfare. Yes, we are inhaling the toxic climate engineering nanoparticle fallout with every single breath we take. From the UK Guardian, air pollution linked to lung cancer driving DNA mutations, study finds. Imagine that. More bubbling to the surface as people are dropping dead. Research finds that the higher the levels of air pollution in a region, the more cancer-promoting mutations are present. Well, that doesn't sound good, does it? How about this? The massive portion of climate engineering elements that are in the nanoparticle range go completely unreported by design. System designed not to show this most toxic particle of all. How about that? Not guessing, not speculating. I've been in high-level meetings in Sacramento arranged by congressional reps. Top-level EPA scientists and officers told me to my face, system is designed not to show this pollution, period. Again, in regard to every breath you take, consider and remember that it isn't just particle pollution from industrialized societies themselves. The single greatest source of atmospheric nanoparticle pollution is climate engineering fallout, solar radiation management operations. To those that are willing to face just how bad it actually is, shine the brightest light you can find on the darkest night possible away from light pollution after a day of hazy, sprayed out skies. Look straight up through the light beam, and you will be shocked to your core. It looks like a blizzard of toxic elements, again, that are not visible during the daylight hours. And that's what we're all inhaling with every single breath we take. DNA damaging, neurological and cardiovascular system damaging, synergistically toxic nanoparticle pollution. Many disinformation sources are still pushing the just jet exhaust from fuel additives completely false narrative, with new sources constantly appearing, pushing the same false just jet exhaust narratives. It is imperative to share only credible data from a proven, credible source. Anything less harms the credibility of this most dire cause. The 40 to 60 million tons of toxic heavy metal and polymer nanoparticle fallout in our atmosphere is the result of intentionally sprayed dispersions, retrofit wing nozzles visible, often turning dispersions on and off, often with aircraft tracking transponders turned off, often in non-commercial flight paths. Bottom line, no, it absolutely isn't jet exhaust. A mind-numbingly false claim. Dumping 40 to 60 million tons of highly abrasive nanoparticles into jet turbines would bring down every single jet plane in the sky. Bottom line, geoengineering jet sprayed dispersions. That's what's filling our skies with filth. From the UK Guardian, why nuclear war, not the climate crisis, is humanity's biggest threat. Approximately 4,000 nuclear weapons are poised for a first strike across the northern hemisphere. That's shocking, isn't it? Certainly alarming, but is it the whole story? Is there actually a triggering mechanism that would lead to the nuclear everything? Climate and ecological collapse, being made exponentially worse by climate engineering operations, is the bottom line factor that's fueling total controller desperation and likely soon nuclear war. All is connected. All is inseparable. Further, as I've pointed out so many times, climate engineering is decimating our formerly protective atmosphere, the ozone layer, which is already on the cusp of functional collapse. The sun feels super intense on your skin and surfaces because it is. We're getting UVC on the surface. That's a DNA damaging spectrum on top of the DNA mutating particles. Climate engineering operations are making Earth far more vulnerable to solar activity, CMEs, or solar flares. And now a large solar event would trigger grid shutdowns around the globe, followed by nuclear power plant meltdowns. Translation, Fukushima times 442. Game over. Here's my point. Nuclear everything is inseparable from climate engineering, weather warfare, and the unfolding abrupt climate collapse. On that note, planetary meltdown is here, only partially masked by ongoing and ever more aggressive chemical ice nucleation climate engineering operations, aka flash chemical surface cooldowns whenever there's enough moisture to do so, often accompanied by baseball and softball size super hail. In regard to the unfolding planetary meltdown, which again is being further fueled by climate engineering operations on top of countless other sources of human damage, it's an all-the-above equation. Yes, Al Gore and all the other major environmental organizations are behaving with criminal hypocrisy, but that doesn't change reality. To pretend there's nothing wrong with the climate system because of disdain for Gore and friends is a grave mistake. From AccuWeather, over 2,800 high-temperature records set during heat wave. A week-long heat wave set over 2,800 record high temperatures in towns across the nation, with some locations measuring their hottest June or hottest all-time temperatures. And that's in spite of what we see routinely is an underreporting of the official high temperature, not an overreporting, an underreporting. It's worse than they're telling us. I've stated that for 16 years at geoengineeringwatch.org. It's not as bad as they're telling us. It's exponentially worse because they're trying to pacify populations till the moment of impact while they prepare for what's coming. And that's exactly what they're doing. AccuWeather report continues a total of 955 daily high temperature records and 1,899 daily high minimum, that's warm nights. That's even worse. Records were tied or broken during the last week's heat wave alone. Nights are warming twice as fast as daytime highs. Why? Because the heat's not escaping. Why? Because we're filling our fishbowl with heat-trapping gases and heat-trapping climate engineering particulates. In the U.S. West, specifically the northern half of California, the U.S. Drought Monitor official map shows zero drought. That's a blatant, glaring lie that should be shockingly apparent for anyone that lives here. I do. So much more to the equation than just a specific amount of rain during a specific calendar year. And when they shut the rain off and they drop the humidity and the changed atmospheric conditions sucks the moisture out of everything at blinding speed, we have flash drought, a term that's now commonly used. It's bone dry in Northern California. And the eastern half of the U.S. is kept intermittently wet and chemically cool. That's where most Americans live. And that keeps them oblivious to the true state of damage around the planet. All hell is breaking loose in countries all over the world. And most Americans have not a clue. Time to wake up, investigate, and realize the party's almost over. The controllers are going to play bigger cards soon. Bet on it. From IFLscience.com, Earth's energy imbalance is more than double what it should be, and we don't know why. How much do we hear that from the so-called climate science community? I knew why. I knew it was much worse than we were being told. Are you telling me that none of the tens or hundreds of thousands of academicians had a clue? Really? The report says the amount of heat accumulating near the surface of the planet is currently more than twice as high as even the best climate change models could have predicted. Think about that. I've stated that emphatically for 16 years, and they're saying the best climate change models could not have predicted this? I knew. I stated it on the record again and again and again. Now they're having to admit to it because they can no longer hide it. They say indicating that there may have been a major piece of the puzzle missing in our calculations. You think? Look up. They continue with this. Yet as scientists scramble to get their heads around the record-breaking data, budget cuts are threatening to thwart all efforts to monitor the situation and find a solution. Stop there. Yes, they are doing their best. The power structure is now doing its best to hide any data sources that can further reveal climate engineering and further reveal the coming imminent impact of abrupt climate collapse, further fueled by climate intervention operations, aka weather warfare. The amount of heat actually accumulating near the surface of the planet is currently more than twice as high as even the best climate change models could have predicted. Think about that statement. I knew, the whole of academia didn't. Really? They further said a major piece of the puzzle is missing in our calculations. Look up, and maybe you'll figure something out. And they also stated budget cuts are threatening to thwart all efforts to monitor the situation, which is simply a means of covering the tracks of the climate engineers. The IFL Science Report continues with this. Reporting the alarming rise, the authors of a new study say that the trend has taken us by surprise. That's a quote. And that the continued rise in energy imbalance since 2020 leaves us with little doubt that the real-world signal has left the envelope of model internal variability. In other words, their models are virtually worthless. Yes, we're back to what I've stated on the record here. Going back 10 years, the planet was warming at the thermal energy equivalent of about 4 Hiroshima-sized nuclear bombs per second. Now it's up to 13 per second, most of it going into the oceans at the moment, not for much longer. And the whole of academia is just now figuring that out. They say the root cause of the discrepancy between models and observations is currently not well known, but it seems to be dominated by a decrease in Earth's solar reflectivity. Write the researchers. For instance, a decrease in cloud cover combined with the shrinking of the polar ice caps may reduce the planet's capacity to reflect sunlight back into space. That's like saying if you jump off a 100-story building, you may experience some discomfort when you hit the sidewalk. It's mind-numbing. These are coming from scientists, these statements. No, not could, may, might. When the polar ice melts, the planet's former albedo, its reflectivity, is blown to bits. Different planet. Further, the climate engineering atmospheric spraying and associated frequency transmission manipulation of the particles is decimating the planet's natural cloud-forming capabilities and the ozone layer. The threat posed by this fact alone cannot be overstated. Venus syndrome is unfolding. No, it's not a metaphor. Climate engineering weather warfare is fueling that process. Search geoengineeringwatch.org, Venus syndrome. Learn what most would rather not know. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Moving on, AI definition. Abrupt climate collapse. Abrupt climate collapse refers to a sudden, large-scale shift in the Earth's climate system, exceeding the capacity of human or natural systems to adapt. These shifts are often characterized by non-linear. How many times have I said that in this program? What we face is a non-linear equation. Responses, meaning the magnitude of change is disproportionate to the initial forcing factor. Examples include the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. How many times have I made mention of this exact geological epoch on this broadcast? And feedback loops, again, methane, prime feedback loop. Search Siberian methane craters, take a look, looks like nuclear bomb detonations. As the tundra thaws and the methane deposits literally explode into the atmosphere, methane migrates to the upper layers of the atmosphere, starts to cover the planet like a layer of glass, more heating, more methane releases more heating. That's only one of about 50 feedback loops that have already been triggered. Most have absolutely no idea how severe and immediate the threat we face is and how fast it's unfolding. Key characteristics of abrupt climate collapse, non-linear response, already mentioned that. Small changes in one area can trigger large, unexpected shifts in other parts of the climate system. Again, over 50 feedback loops already triggered. Potential for severe consequences. Abrupt climate shifts can lead to widespread ecological damage, resource scarcity, social disruption. No, not lead to. Already happening. Back to nuclear, everything. Directly connected to ecological collapse, climate collapse, everything. Directly connected to climate engineering, aka weather warfare, everything. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum extinction event from 56 million years ago has many parallels to what is taking place today, except that what is taking place now is far worse because this scenario is happening at hundreds of times the pace of the PETM event. Translation, it's hundreds of times worse, and that doesn't bode well for the future of the human race. The AI definition then states, release of methane from permafrost or ocean sediments. Went over that. Bermuda Triangle, same thing. Methane released from the seafloor. That's what it's been the whole time. While the potential for abrupt methane release is debated, it could significantly amplify global warming if it occurs. Again, we're back to if you jump off a 100-story building, you could, may, might get hurt when you hit the sidewalk. No, there's no could, may, might. It will completely change our planet, and not for the better. There's more. Changes in land surface characteristics, alterations in vegetation cover, albedo, dust, smoke emissions can also trigger abrupt climate changes. No, again, not can, not could, not may, not might, already has. Developing adaptation strategies, the AI report states, preparing for the impacts of abrupt climate collapse, such as sea level rise, extreme weather events, and resource scarcity is essential. No, there's no preparing for a dead planet. Game over. We have one choice: alter our course and try to salvage some part of the planet's remaining life support systems, or we are at the end of the road. Moving on, more climate engineering and climate collapse cover-up from Reuters. Bezos-backed methane tracking satellite is lost in space. An $88 million satellite backed by the billionaire Jeff Bezos that detected oil and gas industry emissions of the powerful greenhouse gas methane has been lost in space. How convenient for the controllers. The group that operates it said this Tuesday of this week, the pressure on the oil industry to deal with their methane emissions has decreased as the United States, under the current president and his administration, has effectively ended a U.S. program to collect greenhouse gas data from major polluters. This is all part of climate engineering cover-up. If you thought that this incoming group was any different than the last group, think again. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Just keep the theater going with a few new acts in the play, distract everyone till the moment of impact. From the New York Times, there's a race to power the future. China is pulling away. Beijing is selling clean energy to the world. Washington is pushing oil and gas. Both are driven by national security. Let's stop there. There is no, quote, clean energy with current technology, but the alternative forms are still superior to straight-up incineration of carbon fuels, which is what Washington continues to double down on. Both are ultimately dead ends. If you want to know how non-renewable, so-called renewable energy is, search and view the documentary Planet of the Humans. You will find it well worth your time. The insanity of fracking is already failing. The aquifer poisoning wells have a very short lifespan, the fracking wells, with 500 chemicals, 300 of which they don't even have to disclose, thanks to the power structures cover up in that arena. And fracking wells, again, fail very soon. And about the rest of the carbon fuel wells, in 1900, 1 barrel of energy, the year 1900, 1 barrel of energy could get another 100 out of the ground. Now we're down to about 1 in 5 because it's much harder to find and extract. That's a 95% decrease. The tar sands for an oil source, that's an energy net negative right now. It takes more energy to produce the final product than you get out of it. They're just changing one form of energy to another, natural gas to liquid hydrocarbon, at a net loss. How long can that continue? How many Americans have absolutely no idea about any of this? They just watch Matrix Media tell them MAGA, whatever the hell they're telling them, and we're all going to go to Disney World vacations for the rest of forever. Mind-numbing deception till the last possible moment. And as horrible as all this news is, and as bad as it may make many feel, perhaps hopeless, please stay with me through this broadcast, because I will get to the points that matter beyond any of this. Please stay with me. First, let's rewind for a moment that we may clearly see the true severity of where we are headed. From multiple major sources, scientists looked back in time to find the first signs of human-caused planetary change, warming. They're referring to it's far earlier than previously thought. How many times have I said that on this broadcast? Now they're admitting to it. The findings detailed, the paper published Monday this week, the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, raised the likelihood that humanity has been remaking the planet's climate in a detectable way for much longer than previously believed, between 1860 and 1899. I've brought that up so many times in this broadcast, how they have faked the global temperature rise, not to the upside, but to the downside. They have hidden much of the warming. How do they do that? Because on the temperature rise graphs from the start of the industrial civilization, changing of our planet's systems, they draw a baseline halfway up the rise in temperatures. That's hiding half the warming. That's a lie. Nobody questions it. Nobody questions the fake UV warning readings that, as bad as they may seem, are hiding most of the UV because they're not even measuring for it. It's a lie. Drought monitor, a lie. So much of every climate, anything from any official source is a lie. It's much, much worse than anything we're being told. And those who claim to be fighting climate engineering are actually, too many of those are actually towing the line for the narratives of the climate engineers by pretending there's nothing wrong with the climate. The planet is broken, and climate engineering has helped to break it, and that will be impossible to deny for much longer. Wait and see. Moving on, here's a honeybee collapse update, or should I say cover-up, from science.org. Scientists identify culprit behind biggest ever U.S. honeybee die-off. The report says as soon as scientists at the U.S. Department of Agriculture caught wind of the record-breaking die-offs, they sprang into action. But their efforts were slowed by a series of federal funding cuts and layoffs by President Donald Trump's administration. Now, 6 months later, the USDA scientists have finally identified a culprit. No, they haven't. They're completely covering up with yet another excuse that does not address climate engineering and the toxic aluminum nanoparticle fallout that we already have peer-reviewed study to prove bees dying of symptoms that resemble Alzheimer's and dementia in a human being. They can't even find their way back to the hive. How soon till none of us can find our way back to our homes? Because we're sucking up this toxic nanoparticle pollution with every breath we take. Not just toxic by itself, but you have synergistic toxicity, aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, graphene, surfactants. We have mercury in us. All of us have mercury. We have peer-reviewed science study to prove when you combine aluminum and mercury, both highly toxic by themselves, toxicity can increase by as much as 10,000%, 100 times worse. Isn't it interesting that those two exact elements were in certain medical treatments that we're not really allowed to name or talk about? And are we to think the medical industrial complex didn't know just how bad the combination of those two elements were? Really? Moving on. So how are things in the Great White North, where it never really gets that hot, does it? In the polar regions, from Alaska's newssource.com, red flag warning and heat advisories issued for parts of Alaska. This is a new headline. For the record, this is the second heat warning ever. First one was a week ago. In the lower 48 states, earlier this week from PBS, one more sizzling hot day for the eastern U.S. before temperatures plunged 30 degrees. Under the heading of weather whiplash, the high-pressure heat dome, we know about that. Ionosphere heater induced high-pressure heat dome is used to steer upper-level wind currents, which is used to steer moisture currents, which is used to cool down some places while baking others. They say the high-pressure heat dome that has baked the east was forecast to break, scheduled to break. A cold front began moving south from New England, bringing with it clouds and cooler temperatures. It's the clouds and the moisture with chemical ice nucleation that are cooling down the surface temperatures. We're speaking to private jet pilots that are saying they're seeing temperatures jump 30 degrees 1,000 feet off the deck. That's wrong. Cold air settles to the surface. Think of the freezer in your market with no lid. The cold air sits in that base, and that's exactly what they're doing to fool the population into thinking it's cooler than it is. That's exactly what they're doing. It's a chemical cool down. The report continues, weather whiplash from one extreme to another is often a sign of human-caused climate change because of the jet stream. No, it's not. Weather whiplash extremes are a sign of climate engineering, period. A warming planet doesn't suddenly flash to chemical cold without a whole lot of help. When that happens, the report says it means more extremes such as heat wave or drought or downpours. And then when the stuck jet stream moves on, the report says it sometimes results in opposite extreme weather. Total climate engineering cover-up. PBS should be held accountable for their part in the criminal cover-up of covert weather warfare operations. Climate engineering is the core causal factor behind the extreme weather whiplash. Everything. Every single environmental group of any type should get zero, not a penny, unless or until they focus on the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat, and that's climate engineering. And right now, they're all protecting their 501c3 nonprofits, and they're saying exactly nothing about this most dire environmental issue of all, criminal hypocrisy. Here's a parallel report headline from MSN. Eastern U.S. cooks for one more day before 30-degree temperature drop. Again, yes, welcome to Chemical Ice Nucleation Operations. Search the Engineering Winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more. In the western U.S., the heat has been absolutely hellish. The lack of moisture in soils and flora, devastating. Again, so-called cool downs just mean a climate engineering chemical cloud canopy that brings scorching daytime temperatures down nearer to so-called normal, which isn't actually normal because the bracket of temperatures utilized to determine what so-called normal is an ever more recent and thus hotter range of temperatures. Thus, the now new normal is actually far hotter than the true historical baseline temperatures would have been. The drought monitor, again, also a lie. From MSN, haunting images as wildfires explode across California and residents told to flee. For the record, the climate engineering nanoparticle saturated atmosphere is much more electrically conductive, often with less overall moisture in western U.S. convective storms. Translation, more dry lightning, more fires in the now dried out and dying forests. They are using forest fires as part of climate engineering operations. Please, not speculation. Peer-reviewed study to prove this. Please search the engineering wildfire section at the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Please search, view, and share. Wildfires serve geoengineering agenda. One of our most important short video reports. Please help us to get that information out. On that note, from the Northern California media source, the Record Searchlight, a source that has always done their best to marginalize and deny the climate engineering issue. North State firefighters brace for potential thunderstorms with lightning this week. Weather conditions will challenge firefighters this week as National Weather Service has issued a red flag warning. This is my neck of the woods. Shasta, Siskiyou, and Trinity counties. Thunderstorms may produce dangerous lightning. They did on Tuesday of this week. A bolt of lightning was so close and so powerful to my home, it shook my entire house. Was a fire burning about 6 miles northwest of my home in an area called Gray Rocks. It's near and dear to me for many reasons. I've gone on solo sabbaticals there for many years. Very rugged country. There were lots of bears there before. Started a fire there. Lightning did. Hopefully they'll have that out soon, perhaps already. But bottom line is, none of these scenarios can be separated from climate intervention operations and everything they are doing to change atmospheric chemistry, atmospheric conductivity, atmospheric moisture content. Everything is tainted. Everything. Let's add this from MSN. America's disappearing forests, the silent crisis no one talks about. Wait, yes, someone's been talking about this. Someone's been sounding the alarm for nearly 2 decades. Geoengineeringwatch.org. Search the Into the Wild section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn and see firsthand my sabbaticals into the woods documenting the die-off of the forest, the ways in which climate engineering operations are killing off our forests with every passing day. From the UK Guardian, another form of epidemic. Explosive increase of ticks that cause meat allergy in U.S. due to climate crisis? Really? Everything is climate crisis. No mention of climate engineering, no mention of genetic engineering, none of that. They say the unusually aggressive Lone Star ticks, common in the southeast, are spreading to areas previously too cold for them. Blood-sucking ticks that trigger a bizarre allergy to meat in the people they bite are exploding in number and spreading across the U.S. The extent that they could cover the entire eastern half of the country and infect millions of people is what experts are warning about. The ticks are known to be unusually aggressive and can provoke an allergy in bitten people, whereby they cannot eat red meat without enduring severe reactions such as breaking out in hives and even the risk of heart attacks. Tick bites causing heart attacks from eating meat? Stay with me for a moment and I'll get to the genetic engineering of ticks part. They say there's a tremendous urgency to confront this with new therapies, but the problem is we're going backwards in terms of funding and support. In the U.S., there have been cuts to the CDC and NIH, which means there is a decreasing support mechanism for this problem. Also in Europe, same thing happening. From Euronews.com, Greek health authorities issue alert after man dies of tick-borne illness. Goes on and on. Here's the bottom line. Must we not ask, are ticks, like mosquitoes, being genetically engineered? They're engineering the climate, engineering everything at this point, aren't they? Certainly trying to cull the herd as fast as they can before total collapse hits. It's already unfolding. Let's add the following science study title from the National Library of Medicine, just for the record. From Frontiers in Cellular and Infection Microbiology, Genetic Manipulation of Ticks, a Paradigm Shift in Tick and Tick-Borne Disease Research. Imagine that. Certainly the National Library of Medicine isn't going to disclose exactly what they're doing to these ticks, but you can fill in the blank on your own. Moving on. Back to collapsing climates, drought deluge scenarios, the hallmarks of climate engineering operations. Remember and consider, the weather terrorists control the spigot. Where it rains, where not, how toxic that rain will be. Historical record proves the U.S. military was so completely effective at controlling rain in Vietnam in the 60s that they had to pass INMOD treaties in the 70s forbidding weather warfare, not that anybody pays attention. The Chinese government has long since stated they can and are doing the same, deciding where it will rain and where it won't. Climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare, are inseparable from weather anything. And no, the Chinese aren't doing anything to U.S. citizens. Each government performs the operations over their own populations and elsewhere over passively participating countries. They're all in bed in this together. Regardless of their surface tensions, we have Senate documents some 800 pages long specifically calling for intergovernmental cooperation between, quote, otherwise adversarial nations, because you can't just geoengineer over your own country. Same kind of cooperation as in the global pandemics. Think about it. Not hard to see. Moving on, let's get back to the basics, starting with water from USA Today. Critical reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, hit alarmingly low levels again. Both major reservoirs down to 1/3 of their usual capacity. Summer's just starting. A long simmering water crisis in the West is back with a vengeance amid ebbing water reservoirs, drought, and wildfire risks. Groundwater table dropping also. And guess what else we can add to this mix? Toxic algae blooms now, because the extreme heat, not cooling off at night, intense UV radiation, thermal energy buildup is helping to fuel algae blooms along with pollution that's in these reservoirs as well. What a wonderful world it all is, isn't it? The situation there is going to get far worse soon. Wait and see. Across the Atlantic, from the Washington Post, Europe's expanding heat wave fuels record temperatures, including in the Alps. Heat records were set for June in Spain and Portugal over the weekend during a new surge of extreme heat that's roasting Europe. Never before has it been so hot over such a large area and so early! Exclamation point. That's from the article. From the UK Guardian, droughts worldwide pushing tens of millions towards starvation, says report. Water shortages hitting crops, energy, and health as crisis gathers pace amid climate breakdown. Climate collapse is what it is. Wednesday's report follows a series of recent warnings on the world's water crisis. Let's stop there. No, not tens of millions starving, hundreds of millions. The mass die-off of the human race is well underway and accelerating, while far too many Americans continue to be distracted with a constant streaming of political, sports, and reality TV circus. Nero fiddles while Rome burns, as the proverb goes. More on the accelerating climate engineering cover-up from the UK Guardian. Key climate change reports removed from U.S. government websites. The National Climate Assessments help state and local governments prepare for the impacts of a warming world. It also helps to reveal the totality of the climate engineering onslaught. They want all of that covered up. From USA Today, CO2 levels in the atmosphere are higher than they have been in human history and the highest in at least 14 million years. An observatory high on Hawaii's Mauna Loa volcano that measured carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has reported its highest ever seasonal peak concentrations in the greenhouse gas. For those who continue to falsely parrot, CO2 is great, the more the better, we need to burn more carbon fuels, please do some real research. Yes, it's necessary, so is water. Put your crops a foot under, see how well they do. You can't alter atmospheric carbon to that degree. Now let's add methane, let's add nitrous oxide, but you can't alter to this degree. Over 50% increase in the geologic blink of an eye, changing atmospheric chemistry completely, now adding climate engineering elements, everything else. You can't do that and have a good result. If everything was thriving, think about this. Everything was thriving before we got here and pumped up the CO2 content by over 50%, and now everything's dying. Obviously, that's not the issue. We don't need more of that. And that's a trigger mechanism to all the other gases I already mentioned. It's imperative that we understand reality. If the subject of climate anything comes up, counter with this. How can we have any legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering element in the equation? Build a bridge that way, but don't burn the bridge by claiming there's nothing wrong with the planet and claiming that we need to drill baby drill and burn baby burn, and that's going to help us. That does nothing but burn bridges with people who we need in this fight, people who know we've been horrible stewards of the planet, and that's simply a wishful, delusional thought process that pretends we can continue this carbon fuel carnival into eternity. Not going to happen. Moving on from CNN, Trump administration tries to kill the most indisputable evidence of human-caused climate change by shutting observatory. Mentioned part of that a moment ago. It's not just climate collapse cover-up, it's climate engineering cover-up. That's part of what this is. About the imploding cryosphere, the poles, aka the planet's air conditioners. From severe weather Europe, Arctic sea ice reaches historic low for late June, with winter impacts expected if the weather pattern persists. It's certainly going to keep going this direction. The report goes on. Forecasts indicate that the trend could continue with sea ice extent reaching its lowest point on record in September, raising the likelihood of winter impacts. We're heading for a blue ocean event. That will be a complete change in our planet's life support systems. The ice mass is crashing all-time lows, the volume, and that's all that really matters. They're hiding the surface extent by claiming that any area of Arctic Ocean that's 15% slush or more is ice pack. Really? That still sounds like 85% ocean. Let's keep going. There's more from the conversation.com. Completely unexpected. Antarctic sea ice may be in terminal decline due to rising southern ocean salinity. Here we have it again. Every week there's more. Unexpected. Didn't know how bad it was. We're so shocked. How come I knew at geoengineeringwatch.org? I have known, I've stated it on the record, it's far worse than we're being told, and now we have so-called academia beginning to admit it only because they can no longer hide it. What about Greenland? From Scientific American, we have this. What Greenland's ancient past reveals about its fragile future. Let's cut to the chase. Here's the conclusion. Meltdown. Approximately 5.5 trillion tons. That's how much water weight the Greenland ice sheet has lost to the ocean since just 2002. Let's put this into swimming pool perspective. If you had massive Olympic-sized pools, 660,000 gallons each, you could have one of those pools for every person living in Africa and Europe. 2.2 billion 660,000 gallon pools, and it's just the beginning. That's how much is melted and flowed into the ocean. So for those that are still pushing the mind-numbingly false narrative of, quote, global cooling, or even more ridiculous coming ice age claims, zero credibility. That's where you stand. To those that want to help stop the climate engineering assault, share, again, proven credible data from a proven credible source. Geoengineeringwatch.org is the only source that has done any of the testing like we have done. Only source. Keep that in mind. AMOC current shutting down. This is definitely bad news. That's the planet's heat circulation. On that note, the mind-numbingly moronic proposal from the so-called climate science community. Listen to this. This is maybe the most ridiculous yet, and that's saying a lot. From newscientist.com, the bold plan to save a vital ocean current with giant parachutes. Large sea anchors could be used to drag water under a bold plan to keep the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. That's the AMOC current I just mentioned. But some experts are skeptical. This is mind-numbing. This is more mind-numbing than Brazil-sized balloons in space, space mirrors, 10 million wind-powered water pumps, covering the poles with reflective tarps. This is the science community. We're going to have boats towing parachutes underwater to drag water with them to fuel an ocean current that would be 1 billion times more water flowing than anything every boat on the planet could possibly move. And this is a proposal from the so-called science community? Truly, this is the asylum. The Truman Show planetary orbiting asylum. Ocean acidification also growing rapidly worse, and yet the climate engineers continue to force even more ocean acidification with so-called ocean fertilization materials that are part of the solar radiation management operations being conducted over our seas. Climate intervention operations, aka chemical and biological warfare. If we don't deal with this, we're done. That's simple. That's why I'm focused on this issue so exclusively, because if we can't fix this, all other causes and concerns are absolutely moot. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 517, July 5th, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is aired on numerous AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, the one-stop educational tool that helps fully expose the climate engineering atrocities, now with over 26 million views on YouTube. Best way to share: circulate the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still aren't looking up. Start a conversation. Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal: to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, pictures worth 1,000 words. We pass our printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We have Geoengineering Watch shirts, new colors. We have hoodies. We have now blue shirts available on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. That's the start of introducing others to what's happening in our skies. Reaching a critical mass of awareness. Only way forward in this fight. We must reach a critical mass, and all the other wheels will then turn on their own. Wait and see. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so we can post it on our activist compilation page. That's part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. And to all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering onslaught, my deepest gratitude to you, now and forever. Moving on, I'm going to blaze through as many headlines as I can. You can look them up to learn more. I never have enough time to cover a fraction of what's happening around the world, so people don't know. Let's start here. From Severe Weather Europe, massive hailstones cause million in damage. That's Austria. From the UK Independent, tourists warned as parts of Europe fry in extreme heat wave. From BalkanEU.com, Balkans endure record heat wave, prompting health alerts and wildfire fears. From HURRIYETdaily.com, Turkey battles wildfires as heat wave fuels rapid spread. From ALmonitor.com, Syria's wheat war, drought fuels food crisis for 16 million. Control the food supply, control the population. That's exactly how it works. From Times.ca.com, Tajikistan and Central Asia face escalating water crises. Cut the water off, control the food supply, control the population. From Al Jazeera, the Caspian Sea is shrinking. It's visible with the naked eye. From AMU TV, severe water shortage in Helmand, that's Afghanistan, leaves families walking for hours for a few drops. Think about that. While Americans are taking Caribbean cruises, they're walking for hours to find a few drops of water. Does that seem fair? Because it doesn't to me. If anyone anywhere is suffering, if children are dying around the world, that's part of our problem. Question, did our maker put us here to be entertained by scripted political theater or pursue personal pleasures while children are dying around the world, many of them from actions directly related to what our government has done? And the government that seems to be the tail wagging the dog, controlling our government. With 800 foreign military bases around the world, how many countries has and is our military cutting off the precipitation to or flooding out? What is the depth of this insanity? We can only speculate, but certainly it is massive. The global climate engineering Manhattan Project rages around the world every single day. From extremetemps.com, more record hot nights in Pakistan. Elsewhere in Pakistan, flash floods sweep away dozens of people. Drought deluge scenarios, hallmark of climate engineering. From ASHI.com, early pressure patterns causing record-setting heat in Japan again. Another from extremetemps.com, Singapore record hot nights not cooling off. Back to the U.S. from STRIB.com, nearly all of Utah is in drought. Governor Cox asks Utahns to pray and fast for rain. Pray for stopping climate engineering, and you'll have all the rain you could ever want. Much more on a rapidly warming planet. Laws of physics make that clear. If it's not happening, there's a factor that's preventing it from happening. That factor is climate engineering. From IUNC.org, unprecedented fires fueled by climate change threaten iconic World Heritage forests. From theconversation.com, toxic algae blooms, mentioned that earlier, are lasting longer in Lake Erie. Not just Lake Erie, Lake Powell now as well, and many others. And that's a worry for people and pets, much more than that. From the LA Times, Malaysia will stop accepting U.S. plastic waste, creating a dilemma for California. Wow, how terrible is that? California can no longer ship its waste to some poor third world country and dump it there. That's how it works. People think it magically disappears. How many people have been to a, quote, landfill, watching them covering the landscape with toxic filth and thinking that that process could somehow continue? I knew when I was 8 years old, the first time I went to a, quote, landfill. I remember that moment and how appalled I was, and the thought that there's no chance this can possibly continue. I was 8 years old. From foxweather.com, Mediterranean Sea poised to break all-time heat records. This is truly ominous. Ocean water contains 4,000 times the thermal energy of air. Think about that. Rare snowstorm hits Earth's driest desert, Atacama, in Chile. This is exactly the kind of headline the climate engineers and the controllers strive for, because for so many people, when they see a headline like this, no matter how dead and dry it is where they're at, they tell themselves, look, it snowed in the Atacama. Everything must be fine. Who cares if it's engineered, right? From the UK Guardian, climate is our biggest war. This is a warning from the CEO of the COP30 climate conference that's ahead of the UN summit in Brazil. First, the COP climate conferences are smoke and mirrors. The most powerful countries behind closed doors forcing other countries to actively or passively participate in the climate engineering insanity. They have no plans to change business as usual, only to accelerate until there's nothing left. Extractive everything to fuel the military-industrial complex of insanity until there's virtually nothing left. The report states climate is our biggest war. Climate is here for the next 100 years. We need to focus and not allow these other countries and their wars to take our attention away from the bigger fight that we need to have, end quote. If we only had 100 years to sort this all out, or 10 years, or even 5, we don't. But yes, the collapsing life support systems of the planet are the bottom line factor on which all else depends, everything else. The single most destructive puzzle piece in the equation is climate engineering, though there are many other catastrophic human activity components, and it's imperative to remember and consider all of it if credibility is to be maintained. Again, when the subject of climate anything comes up, no matter what a person's position that you're trying to convey the climate engineering subject to, simply fall back to how can we have any credible conversation about climate anything without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. And about the carbon fuel carnival, it's almost over. From resilience.org, the oil crash is coming sooner than we think. They then say low energy is the future, either through choice or physics. We are running out of time. Let's stop there. The collapsing planetary life support systems are an even more immediate threat than running out of carbon fuel. It isn't just coming, it's kicking in the front door now. There were dozens of other dire headlines that I wanted to get to, but I simply don't have time in this 55-minute on-air broadcast. That's why I'm limited to that time slot. The 4th of July has come and gone again. Far too many Americans blindly waving their flags that don't have and don't seem to want any clue of the endless resource wars for empire, of the endless false flag operations to provide the premise for the military-industrial complex and money printer-controlled conflicts and chaos around the world. Sports, scripted politics, and Sean Diddy theater, that's as far as most want to see, lest they learn what they don't want to know, or God forbid be ostracized from the herd by taking a stand for truth and justice. And the eyes wide shut flag wavers consider themselves devout patriots. But are they? Mark Twain clearly recognized what was coming from so long ago. This is an excerpt from the As Regards Patriotism essay written in 1901. Patriotism is merely a religion, love of country, worship of country, devotion to the country's flag and honor and welfare. In absolute monarchies, it is furnished from the throne, cut and dried to the subject. In England and America, it is furnished, cut and dried to the citizen by the politician and the newspaper. The newspaper and politician manufactured patriot often gags in private over his dose, but he takes it and keeps it on his stomach the best he can. Blessed are the meek. Twain continues, sometimes in the beginning of an insane and shabby political upheaval, he, the programmed patriot, is strongly moved to revolt, but he doesn't do it. He knows better. He knows that his maker would find out. The maker of his patriotism, the windy and incoherent $6 sub-editor of his village newspaper, and would bray out in print and call him a traitor. And how dreadful that would be. It makes him tuck his tail between his legs and shiver. Nothing has changed. How many so-called patriotic Americans are willing to do an honest investigation of 9/11 and then to speak out about it? How many? How many are petrified of making their voices heard lest they be separated from the herd? A profound alteration of core philosophy and faith is desperately needed for a great many in the ranks of the human race. Our Maker has made each of us responsible for ourselves. Our God-given will is our only true possession that can't be taken from us ever by anyone. Never forget that. The correct, just, and moral use of our free will is our absolute obligation. Silently siding with the herd mentality in the attempt to foster a false sense of safety and security is the wrong choice. Forgive me for yet again making mention of the following documentary, but as collapse closes in from countless directions, the theme of this documentary is so clear and so moving, it grows more important by the day. Earth and the American Dream is moving to the marrow. A masterpiece documentary, the cold hard truth that far too few are yet willing to face. You can find this online and view it for free. It's there if you look. Sooner than almost any dare to imagine, facing reality won't just be an option, there'll be no other choice. It's already kicking in the front door. I can't say how many times I viewed this film, but it's a lot. And even so, during the final messages of this incredibly important compilation of facts and timeless wisdom, I am still unable to hold back the tidal wave of emotions that sweep over me. Profound sorrow, always followed by an overwhelming sense of righteous rage, a rage that has been driving me forward for 27 years since the first day when this film appeared on the widescreen TV that I wasn't even watching. Late afternoon in my home near the top of the Wallapai Mountains in Arizona. I was alone. I was riveted. I scarcely moved a muscle for the entire 70 minutes of this film. I remember every detail, the rays of the setting sun through the window, the shadows in the room, everything. My life has never been the same. I have never looked back from 1998 till now. I will never stop marching forward in this fight, ever. The event was not just an accident of fate. I have long since bet my life that it was fate, a summoning from my maker. For centuries, the human race has lived as if its fate was separate from the fate of the earth. Extremely near-term planetary omnicide will be the price, short of a complete course correction. I've also formerly made mention of a timeline of planetary decimation that is sobering, to say the least. Here's a more detailed version of it. From Earth and the American Dream. Consider that if the Earth's over 4 billion year geologic history was compared with the 6 days named in the biblical book of Genesis, each day would be just over 660 million years. On such a timeline comparison, 2 minutes before midnight on the last day, man appeared. 1/4 of a second before midnight came Christ. And in the final 1/40th of a second before midnight, the Industrial Revolution, the modern military-industrial complex, the age of man, aka the Anthropocene epoch. Stop and consider that modern industrialized, militarized, so-called society has absolutely decimated our formerly thriving planet instantaneously in geologic timescales. The vast majority are desperately trying to convince themselves that this planetary destruction at blinding speed can continue forever. Those that hold this opinion are considered sane and normal. They have literally lost their minds. Skyscrapers all over the world will very soon bear silent testimony to the omnicidal behavior of the human race. So this is where far too many decide to give up. They tell themselves there's no point trying because we're doomed. Perhaps, yet there is so much we can't yet know in this equation. But whatever the case, consider this: no matter how dark the horizon, each and every individual, each and every soul that our collective efforts helps to awaken, that our collective efforts helps to see the wider horizon without fear, without timidity, without trepidation, matters in ways we can't yet know or fully understand, but it matters. If enough can be awakened, if enough summon the courage and join the fight to awaken still more with the knowledge that such an effort matters in and of itself, that such an effort is morally correct, and what our Maker would want and expect of us, then who can say what good we may yet accomplish even at this late hour? Doing what is right for the simple reason that it is right will always be right. This is the narrow path that leads to absolutely unshakable solace and salvation. We are playing the grandest game of chess we must learn to play effectively and efficiently. Share proven credible data from a proven credible source. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please stand with us. Face the gathering storm head on. Make your voice heard. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.